to season 2. Season 1 was all about learning for me how to do a podcast, and for the guests about what mattered to them when it came to culture, leadership and EVP. I've made it my mission over the last 11 years, 12 years within further education recruitment to learn so much about people, culture, what makes the organisations tick, and ultimately try and bring you podcasts with people that really make a difference. As we move into season 2, it's become more of a conversation. So you'll notice that the style is more relaxed, that we are about putting these leaders at ease and learning the best parts of their journey. Some of the challenges that they've faced, some of the amazing people that they've met, some of the incredible outcomes that they've produced. Season 2 is about some of the best conversations I think you've got to hear. And we have so many exciting guests, so many really passionate, incredibly experienced people that are going to add so much value if you take the time to listen to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the page and follow to learn more. My name's Guy Walker and welcome to the Culture and Leadership Podcast. Today we're kindly being hosted by Yeovil College and we've come all the way here to meet John Evans from FE Solutions. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career in FE and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a bit surreal today, being sat in Yeovil College, which was one of the colleges that I was principal at. So it was nice to come back here today. For me, I think initially I was quite a rarity. So I was a principal that had come up through the apprenticeship route. I was a car mechanic, an apprentice car mechanic, and then came through the route, became a motor vehicle lecturer, and then progressed through. I've been fortunate enough to be part of 5 journeys to outstanding in 5 separate colleges, and have enjoyed every single one of them. I haven't necessarily wanted to work up through the ranks, it's just happened. Yep. And I'm sure that will come out as we talk through various things. But I've never lost my passion, and my passion is that the student is the customer, and I always think that we should always be striving to give them the best opportunity that we possibly can. And I've never lost that drive. And consequently, teaching and learning is at the heart of everything that I do, really. That's
really interesting. I was with Andy Green from Chichester College not a month ago. And he also said, and he also asked from an outstanding college where he just said the student is the customer, and the better we keep them at the focus of everything, the better off we will be. But that's a strange trajectory to come from. Do we hear of many motor vehicle lecturers, motor mechanics coming to the top? So what actually initially got you into further education? How did you end up at a college?
I have to say there are some now, because I do know some of them are friends of mine. But I think initially there wasn't many. I was quoted. I quoted once. I think I was the only one that came up through the apprenticeship route, but I don't think that was true. There was maybe 2 or 3 others. What got me interested? I guess if you go right back, I didn't have a great schooling because I'm a doer, and I left school with very little. And yet I'm sat here today with a master's degree, having been principal of one of the biggest colleges in the country. I stepped down last summer. So was I wrong, or was the educational system not fit for purpose for what I needed at that time? And I think that's what FE does. I think it enables all people with all different ways of learning to be able to progress. And I firmly believe that. Whenever I talk about students, I use the word customer. If you go back even further, I was brought up as a child in a corner shop, in a day when corner shops were really busy. Yeah. And I guess I had it drilled into me from a young age about meeting customer expectation. And I'll give you lots of examples. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but lots of examples where I'm still an Ofsted inspector, which I really enjoy doing when I'm on inspection. And I still go into colleges to support them wherever I can when required, especially around teaching, learning and assessment. But you sort of understand fairly early on whether they truly are customer / learner centered or whether it's just a strap line. And when you dig below the surface, it's not quite there. And I think that's the bit that makes a difference between what Andy said, and I have spoken to Andy and we're very much on the same page about making sure, because whether we like it or not, post-16 education is a choice. The same choice as when you'll decide to go and have your meal at the weekend in a restaurant.
Yes.
Have a bad meal, have a bad service. You probably won't go back, and you will also tell other people not to go back. And you can always tell colleges where they have just focused on finance and not on quality. and the reputation starts to drop, and you end up having this vicious circle then. And we've seen it so many times across the sector.
And that, I totally echo. Totally understand that you can see it in different cultures and different pieces. And I love the fact that FE is a home for everybody. But physically, what made you walk across the walls? How did you become a lecturer from being a mechanic? What was that journey? Just to take it all the way to the beginning, because that normally shapes someone's experience in the space. How did we get from there to there?
Having had such a poor schooling, my view, and clearly I played a part in that, and then went to college as an apprentice motor vehicle technician.
Which college?
I went to Bridgewater College.
Bridgewater College,
where I still live to this day, and are still very fond of. There was just something about. I never had to revise. I never had to put really, I would say, extra work in. I just absorbed it, and it's because of the way it was taught and how we did it. And I sat there one day thinking, I would love to be in that position. I'd love to be a motor vehicle lecturer. It suddenly became a moment where I thought I could do this. Of course, in those days, lecturers' salaries were far higher than anything in the industry. You had the holidays and you had everything else. So the whole package, and actually being able to communicate and educate people on such a fantastic topic, at least it was to me, that's where the desire came from.
So was that a good teacher? Because I always say to people, a great teacher will change your success with education. And it sounds like in school we had some okay teachers, but in FE we found a passionate, energized lecturer that really drew you in. Great teaching brings people into the space.
I agree, and I think if you think back to your school days, you'll always remember not necessarily, you remember your favourite subjects, but the reality is it was because the teacher drew you in. Yeah. I think in FE, because I think back to the sort of teaching I had when I was a student many years ago, and we're talking in the 70s, it wouldn't work today.
No.
And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is that we tend to teach how we were taught. Yeah. And that's actually our barrier, because people don't learn that way anymore. Yeah. We learn differently. And clearly that's what I've become very, very, very passionate about. So, yeah, I think that it was the subject that really drew me in, delivered in what was right at the time, in a process that was right at the time. But I think now that wouldn't work. You've got to be more creative in how we deliver, to really affect that long-term memory and making sure that people remember more and know more on a regular basis. We
will absolutely get into the elements of leadership within TLA. I think that's a massive topic we need to discuss anyway. But you're obviously a consultant to further education post your career full-time permanently. What draws you to working at multiple organisations? What really fires you up about that? Because you obviously have multiple different clients.
I do, but I'm slightly choosy. But also it's about that true passion to improve our core product, which is teaching, learning and assessment. And we can't ignore the fact that drives culture, or rather culture drives it. That's a good debate that we could have. And that's where my passion is. So I still am heavily involved in lots of things, and clearly I'm still involved in inspections, especially with the new toolkit coming on board. It would be interesting to see how that pans out. But I can't say it enough. I'm never happier if I've got a group of, and especially middle managers in front of me, because they're our agents of change, aren't they? You can have a great principal, but if you've not got a good group of agents of change who, and I always say, understand the game fully and know what to do and have tools in their toolkit to be able to do it, any institution will always struggle. So to have an opportunity to do that, which is what I've had recently numerous times, it makes it exciting for me, because you can see the impact. We're driven by giving those, I'm not going to say young people, because the FE is about all ages, but giving those customers such an amazing springboard, because I always think we're a springboard organisation.
Yes.
I mean, universities are very much end game, schools are very much beginning. We are a springboard, so they will go from us they will go on to further FE, they'll go on to higher education, they'll go on to an apprenticeship or straight into work. We are not the end game, we are the springboard. So it's about how do we do that so we give them the best chance in the world and have a biggest impact on the economy.
And you're totally right, and I share that the middle managers of FE, the slightly unsung heroes, that job is really difficult, right? You're managing upwards because you have principal, ELT expectations. You've got staff members that work for you, their expectations, and you're not just managing culture, like we're going to talk about. You're managing TLA, you're managing budgets, you're managing finance. There's so much that goes into that I think that any college that isn't putting that people investment into their middle managers, into their educators, is clearly missing a trick. So that's got to be a conversation starter for you. But going through your career, you said at the very beginning, 5 colleges on 5 journeys to outstanding. That is a feat I'm sure not often replicated. I don't think there's many people I've spoken to that have done that. I've got lots of 2s, lots of 3s that have gone through. 5 times is really impressive. That must give you a lot of highlights. So what are the most exciting, looking back now, what were the best bits of your career?
Oh my goodness, there's loads. I'm going to spin the question a little bit, which is, which do you think was the hardest, or which do you think is the most enjoyable? They're just all different because colleges have such a different demographic. They have different challenges depending on what you've picked up from. A good example for Swindon would have been, and Swindon is high up there with my the best bits, I guess, because it really was in a state. It had 8 grade 4s. It was 2.5 million in debt, but it had 9 principals in 10 years. And so the barrier there was always, oh, how long are you staying for? And so we always need to win hearts and minds and to lead people through that and to help to get, you've got that barrier first. In fact, the interesting, another challenge here at Yeovil College was, I had been on the inspection team 2 years earlier that had given it a very, very weak grade 2. I mean, it scraped in, but it got there. So consequently, I banged along 2 years later and got the principal's job to say, right, in my mind, we're a grade 2. Hang on a minute, you gave us a grade 2 only 2 years ago. So you have that, how do you bring people with you? But honestly, we are just catalysts, aren't we?
Yeah.
And unless people are willing to, unless you can get people to buy in and do all those things, you're wasting your time. And I think the biggest one at Cornwall College was because the college had had such a rough ride for so long. It's been grade 3, grade 4 for many years, never ever had an 8 in front of it for its success rates or achievement rates. So it's never got into the 80s ever. And staff had not had a pay award for 8 years. You could go on, it was 30 million in debt.
Yep.
But everybody wanted change. So in a way, you had the demographic challenge of 113 miles between the 2 furthest campuses and 10 other campuses and then 1 in Spain and 1 in Portugal. But at least you had a group of staff that were phenomenal and just wanted that change, but didn't know what they wanted. You just don't know what you don't know, do you, sometimes?
Yeah, and you were the change maker that brought about...
I was definitely the catalyst, yeah,
and of course, you and I both, and have been chief execs, we both sit at the very top of organisations. We don't do anything. Our job is not to do the thing. Our job is to inspire, to motivate, to guide, to help others do the thing. Our job sits at the top and does almost nothing, right?
It didn't feel like nothing.
It doesn't. Oh my God! No one watching this that is in a chief exec position will think we do nothing. But our job is not to do the do. And I think actually it's always our teams that need to take the credit. We can take as much credit as it takes to pass the credit on. I got nominated for an award the other day, Entrepreneur of the Year. It wasn't me that won that award. It's the team that I've put together, the people that I've built, the business that I've put them into that won that award. And that's the same for any principalship. We hold the position, but the organisation does the thing. And every credit to all the organisations that you've led, I'm sure. But that's been a hell of a journey. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of Cornwall journey of going through, starting that. Where was the culture at in Cornwall when you first got there? Because it sounds like it was brilliant.
In a way, what was really interesting was that because I'd been here at Yeovil College first and cut my teeth on as a principal as opposed to a vice principal, at least the basics I understood and knew. I don't think going into something as big and as huge as the Cornwall College Group without having principal experience would have been possible. I think that would have made it really, really difficult. But what was really similar was, and this may upset some CEOs because we've all got our different philosophies, and do you know what? Whatever works for you.
Celebrate the difference, definitely.
But yeah, for me, I'm always clear on accountability and ownership and empowerment. And therefore, the structure that was here was called a matrix structure, which I'm sure is code for nobody owns anything. And then at Cornwall College, we had what was called a cluster model, a cross group, again, which I'm sure was code for nobody owns anything. So what I wanted to do very quickly was to I always think there needs to be a direct line of sight to the customer experience. So I don't know, carpentry level 2 on X campus is not going well. I need to know exactly who is responsible for that. One person, never share responsibilities. Right, we'll talk about that in a minute. So, and that was the biggest issue. So you've had no accountability over this 113 miles. So, and you imagine how difficult that is, because when I first went in, I could drive and go to one campus and we start getting things right, and then you go to another campus, and then you leave that one for 3 weeks before you go back again. And so it's about who you have with you. It's about making sure, because I've got a number of sayings. One of them is, you're only ever as good as your direct reports.
Absolutely.
Whoever you are, and at whatever level. And for me, making sure that I had a group of senior team that were great. We realigned the organisation, and it meant that to a certain extent I could handpick from everybody that was in there. It's not like bringing people in new, and then you start to drive the culture. But you've got to lead by example as a CEO. You just got to live it and breathe it and do it. I was able to say, when we went into inspection the first time, we were able to say that I know it sounds daft for a CEO, but I had trained every teacher in the Cornwall College group. There's 1,200 teachers. But I spent time with all of them, as well as doing the day job. Because it's your core business, isn't it? How you're only as good as what happens in that classroom, workshop, or workplace. We are judged by that.
Interesting. And it sounds like you've got a lot of leadership principles. And so it kind of begs my question, which is quite an important question to me, is who are your role models? Who did you learn all of this from? Because I can't assume you were born with this brain.
No.
Where do we pick it up from? Because others are surely on this journey.
I strangely, because I'm not a theorist, I'm just a doer. And I've made mistakes, and you learn from mistakes over a longer period of time. When I got to Cornwall, after about 6 months, John Laramie, good friend of mine, principal at Exeter College, brilliant principal, brilliant college. And he came, I did some work for his senior team, and then he came and talked to my senior team. And during that time, he talked about the book Good to Great.
Good to Great. Got a mention on the last podcast as well.
And because I cannot sit still long enough to read a book, if it's a talking book in a car, I can do it. So I always say to my staff, if you want me to read anything, get it on one page, otherwise don't bother giving it to me, because I'll get bored and I'll move on. Just make your point. And that's the mechanic side of me, the engineering side, isn't it? I can't waffle. It's just about do it. And he looked through he talked about Good to Great. So straight away I went home and I downloaded the book, and I had it in my car, and I was hooked, absolutely hooked. And then about 2 months later, I was speaking to my HR director, who just said, we were talking about Good to Great, and she said, when did you first have it then? She said, because everything you do is by the book. Now, I didn't know it was. So it was strange in a way. It sort of reinforced some of the things I was doing, but it gave me the theory of why it was working.
Of course.
I was just lucky, I think.
Intuitive? I think it's intuition.
I'm a people person. So I think we are in a people business. We've had that conversation already. I think if you first and foremost, you've got to win hearts and minds. You've got to have a really clear strategy. But, again, Good to Great's clear. You start with people before strategy. Don't start strategy before people, because it will fall over.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely. So, and interestingly, I didn't know this at the time, but I put together a senior team really, really quickly before we decided on the strategy. I didn't have a theory behind that. It just felt like the right thing to do.
Intuition.
I now know it's the right thing to do.
It was, yeah.
So I think there is a bit of luck. I think I have been lucky, and I think somebody out there has been looking after me. But it has worked on numerous times.
So was John Laramie one of those that mentored you and you took some guidance from? Is it Jim Collins, Good to Great?
Yeah, it is Jim Collins. So I'm going to cut in quickly because it's a really lovely story, because I've got this mandate, which is you just make things happen. I never accept no, right? You just make things. So a good example would be, you're trying to recruit a lecturer for something, and you get to the interview day and 3 of them don't turn up. I instantly phone them that they're home if I was in charge of that area, because it's about then saying, why have you pulled out? Because I'd learned something as well then. 100%. But invariably, because they feel wanted, they come back into the pot. It's probably a bad example. I could give you.
No. I'm a recruiter by craft, right?
Okay.
And if someone doesn't show up to an interview, leaves it to the last minute, says it's not for me anymore, I never accept that. My first job is to call that person and say, I get you're saying it's not for you, but unpack that for me. I'm not trying to talk you around. I've got no interest. Because actually, you don't want to talk someone around. You kind of want someone to work for you. But some of the best people that I've had really good conversations with and address those little concerns, I've managed to talk around, because people are people.
Yeah.
There's always, it's the thing that you didn't say. It's the thing that was missing. It's the thing that went out wrong. It's the overthinking the night before. All of that stuff, it features heavily in the recruitment process. So I'm an advocate, ring them and say.
But you don't have to make the phone call. But the fact that you did makes a difference. Yes. And that's that bit about not accepting. But the funny story I was going to say to you was, I took Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, completely, and I loved it. We then did a session with all the middle managers, and we did the session with them where I turned it to in FE speak. And then I thought, who would be the best speaker I could get? Because John Laramie did it last year. Who would be the best speaker at our away day with the CMT? I'll get Jim Collins. Right. Now you're talking international guru.
Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
It's going to cost me a lot of money, right? But I don't say no. So I've emailed him and I messaged him and explained the situation we were in. And would you like to come and speak to my senior team? Because we're turning the flywheel and we're working our way through it. And in fairness to Jim, he messaged me back with a recording to play to the senior team and to play to the middle management team. And it was just brilliant. I said that says so much about him, but I guess it says a bit about me too, because I was not going to let go until I wanted Jim Collins to come and speak. And he did. Didn't charge me anything, but he then sent me a message and he talked it through about how he was pleased to hear about how the college was turning, and he used all of his own jargon, but he was working on lots of research and he couldn't come out of the States to be able to do it. But thinking about it, I think, how naive was I to think that I could get him to come and speak to my CMT? But I gave it a go.
But you don't. I'm also a doer, John. I never sat. Dovetail is a large business by any measure. It's 90 people. It works with 200 colleges. It employs roughly 800 temporary educators a year, and we place about 4,000 people into FE. When I started, we had 3 contractors. We started with no money. We started with nothing. We just had to do. There was no strategic plan. I can show you a business plan that I showed to Bob Rose, who was a motor vehicle lecturer. He was a friend of mine at the beginning. We had no plan. We just do, and we consistently just do. And you need some guiding principles to get you there. But just doing is probably the excitement that both you and I seem like we thrive on. Is just give me something, give it to me in my hands, and I will make you something. Just in case Jim had tried to charge you, I got a price for Simon Sinek about Find Your Why. It's 50 grand. Yeah. So I'm quite glad that we didn't get him in to charge us. That would have been good. So culture, that's what we're here to talk about. That's partly probably one of the biggest things, and I think you and I both agree on this, that culture impacts pretty much everything we do within an organisation. Sure. So you work at a lot of institutions. Do you see a massive difference in culture, or what do you feel as you walk through these organisations? Yeah,
and I think you feel it very quickly. You from the moment you walk into a reception, it changes. A good example. The examples I give tend to be very operational, but I think they're what people can hang on to. So I've been left here 5 years, I think. You would have walked in reception today here. You would have seen a reception desk. You would have had a smile at the desk, and they would have known you were coming, and they would have sorted you out.
Very true.
Yeah. Go back before I started. So what was that? 4.5 years before that. You would have walked in there, nobody would have spoken to you. You may have been tutted because you're inconveniencing them. And I'm not making this up.
No.
And you will feel that in some organisations. And it's about us all realising that we are in a customer world, which is a people business where we're offering a product and a service where people can choose. It doesn't matter when you come in as a customer, whether you bump into estates, HR, whoever. We all are responsible for that overarching feeling, because when you go out from here, if you've had a bad experience, you tell everybody. If you've had a good experience, you might tell the person next to you. And that's why it's hard. I always think that culture takes 2 to 3 years, reputation takes maybe even longer than that, 5 to 7 years. It can take a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've got lots of examples of where that's taken, because by the nature of doing the Journey to Outstanding on 3 of them were already an inadequate college, and people were going on buses elsewhere, and hence your learner numbers are dropping. It makes it that much harder to make those difficult decisions.
It's a spiral.
To spend money, because you've got to spend some money to be able to break that. When I arrived at Cornwall, we had 110 lecturers without a teaching qual, because 4 years before they'd cut the teaching budget completely to save money. And you think, why would you not invest in the one thing that is your core product?
That's like not buying fuel for a plane.
It's what happens when colleges are led by non-educationalists.
Yeah.
Now, before anybody watching says, hang on a minute, I'm a CEO and not an educationalist, that's fine. It works well as long as you've got a really strong deputy that is an educationalist. You definitely need it in at least 1 or 2 of the top 2 jobs.
Coming back to culture, I think is more important. It's someone that understands the DNA, the fabric. You've just described how I arrived to Yeovil College. The only thing I couldn't find is the car park, but that's because they've got a brand new campus being built.
It's a whole new
so there's a whole
built,
construction piece where I parked in front of a lorry and got lost. But actually, shouldn't say this, but the lady gave me the code to the free parking. And she was like, don't tell anyone. I feel like she does that to everybody. But
it made you feel special.
It made me feel special. Yeah. So even if it is for everybody, I felt special, and I felt well treated as I rocked up to this college. And it's DNA at the very fabric of what it is we do and how it makes people feel. If a learner feels like that, and I saw learners engage and they were feeling like that, it changes your entire experience. And I think I know what you're going to say to this one, but where does culture show up most clearly in an organisation?
I'll tell you what I've always said is that you know you've got the culture right when that member of staff is down the pub telling everybody how good it is. Yep. And we can never control that.
So culture shows up in the pub?
Yeah, everything shows up in the pub. Yeah. I think you can just feel it. I'll give you a good example. I've been at Swindon for about a year. You've got to remember the situation Swindon was in. You know, it'd been the poor relation of the other college, which are now merged, funny enough, of the other college for many, many years. Remember the taxi driver, as I got out of the car, he went, "Are you going in there?" And I just said, "Yes, it's my first day." And he went, "That's a tech. You don't want to go in there." I mean, but a year on, and I remember walking down the corridor, and I walked past the beauty therapy staff room, and on the door it had a sign, and it said, "Staff room, please knock. We're here to help." Right? And I walk further down the corridor in the engineering staff room, and it says, "Please knock. No learners past this point." Now, both messages have the same meaning, but they're all received slightly differently.
Massively different.
And I remember going back to the principal at the time. He was fairly new, and I'd gone in as VP. And I remember reporting it back to him because I've been driving this about this culture. And he said, go and make them take it down. And I just said, there's no point. They will take that down when they realise what it says and what it means. Mm.
We're better off to make them understand its impact.
I go into colleges and very often the principal will tell me that the learner is at the centre of everything they do and all our decision making. And I think, why have I just parked in the staff car park, which is right outside reception? Could you imagine Sainsbury's? You're in Sainsbury's and you're having to carry all your groceries through the staff car park to get back to your car. You go and shop somewhere else. Mm. And it's just that mindset of what a customer needs throughout the whole organisation and how it works.
Because that should be a drop-off zone, right? In infrastructure environment has such a part to play.
Oh, for sure. They've done it here. I know, because that's new to me, but the drop-off zone right outside, it absolutely works really well. I guess for me, I always think that whenever you have meetings, because we meet for the sake of meetings in FE, right? So I scrap all meetings, unless it's going to have an impact on the customer experience or staff health and well-being. Yep. Right? Outside of that, I can't think there's much I want to give my time to. Yep. So you just focus on those two things. Now, clearly there's other stuff that we have to do, but if you keep that at the front of your mind, then you'll never be far away. But yeah, it's that, I can't go back to that customer bit time and time again. It's the same thing that keeps coming up. I give a good example. That culture was at Swindon. I remember on the last day of inspection, the deputy inspector came in, and in those days he used to call me Young John, and he said, "Young John, I give up." And I said, "Why? What's the matter?" This was just literally the night before grading the following day when we got all the grade ones. And he said, "I give up." He said, "I walked down your corridors trying to find a chink in this culture." And he said, "All your staff do is keep dragging me into the staff rooms, showing me all the great stuff they're trying to do with TLA." He said, "You win, I give up."
You can have your grade.
I can't force that, can I?
No. That was a choice, and that was their choice. And when faced with overwhelmingly a positive experience.
Yeah.
I hats off to you. So, culture is at the core of everything we do. Culture shows up everywhere, especially at the pub. Culture has parts to play in physical environments. So then what challenges do you see in building and sustaining a great culture? Because lots of people will say, well, funding changes, what we have to do changes, everything else changes. Does culture need to change with that? Or is culture kind of the fixed thing to an organisation?
I think the outer edges can flex. But if you keep that core, when I think back to the people that really, I don't know, I did 14 years at Bridgewater College, many of them under Fiona Macmillan. And, she was so driven by what was best for the learner on all. And then I went to South Devon where it got, 6 grade 4s or whatever, and went on that journey to outstanding. And that was under Heather Maxwell. And Heather was just driven by, and I remember fairly early on, because we'd moved over to where we were going to move over to where the college was going to be, because we took over the old Nortel factory, which sounds dire, but it wasn't. It was like marble toilets, and because it was they'd spent millions on it, and then the chip world went, didn't it, from Silicon Valley? It just died, and therefore they moved out. And in South Devon, that was a big hit. So massive. She took over that, and then we remodeled it. And I remember when it was a big room like this with a boardroom, and I remember we sat around the outside, and the architects came in with drawings, and effectively they just created corridors. And she just said, How is anybody going to have a great experience in this? And why is teaching and learning behind walls and doors? And she sacked them on the spot. She's like, "Go, I don't want you. I'll get a new design team in." And if you go to South Devon College now, you'll see why. It's all open plan. It's on 3 floors. You've got glass on every wall and every door. And that was Heather. She just but the core was making sure that the customer had a great experience. And TLA was at the heart of that.
And environment was at the heart.
I don't think of that. Well, it drives environment because when you're talking about a new build, when you're talking about strategy, doesn't it start with a curriculum plan? It starts with what curriculum do we think we can do, as a world-class curriculum, and let it drive that. We can't always afford it, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
In FE, but it's a great start. I always think you should only do things if you can do them really well.
100%. Could you share me then, in your 40-odd years, where you've seen a college really successfully shift culture as quick as possible, and what key things made that up? So they've got a new leader, new CEO appointed, new principal appointed. What did that person then do that impacted and made change as quick as possible?
I think probably the biggest change in culture, the quickest one, is probably somewhere between Swindon and Cornwall, I think. I'll go back to Swindon. It was quick, but there's some learning from this. And of course, this is where I learned afterwards why it went wrong, because of Jim Collins and Good to Great. Yeah. So we transformed that culture very quickly. It was on one campus, so I guess that made it easier than across numerous campuses, but just led by example. I'd been there 2 weeks, and the principal was put on garden leave for whatever reasons. So effectively, it gave me a clear steer to be able to do that. And I led by example, and we got the outcome which I talked about just now. And then I moved to Yeovil. 2 years later, the college, or 3 years later, the college has gone back to inadequate, having got outstanding across the board, and has now merged with the 2 colleges and merged together, which was probably the right thing to do.
New College Swindon and Swindon College.
Absolutely. So what was the reason? So you asked me that, how do to drive it was to drive by example. Yes. It is relentless. You are at the forefront of everything and lead. I can remember, I think it was Swindon, where we were doing a staff talk for me to talk to everybody, and I walked in and the estates team were putting the chairs up, and I just instantly started helping them put chairs out. And after about 20 minutes, we got the chairs out. Two of them got to me and said, chief execs don't do that. Now, to me, it was alien because I just think we're all in this together. But maybe we don't do that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. And I guess that buy-in from fairly early on, and also setting standards, it works both ways, I guess. So if I'm walking behind two staff who then walk past two students that are swearing, not their landlords have dropped paper, I ignore the students and speak to the staff and just say, did you not see what I just saw? Because I want to challenge it, otherwise it's never going to get better. Because, and I do this a lot when I support other managers, if I challenge the students, which I really want to, I'll do it forever.
And I very rarely get a chance to input here, but I will input, because actually what I've discovered in my journey around culture and around values and around missions and things is process and procedure has a part to play. But without culture to respect the processes and the procedures, nobody will do what the book says, right? So culture eats strategy for breakfast. I could hand Talentia over to one of my very brilliant colleagues, and they could absolutely run that system. But would they remember all of the small things that matter? Like this morning, I shocked most of our trainee consultants by cleaning up plates and cups that were left the night before, whilst lambasting everyone that had left plates and cups on their desk, because I said, this place is a tip. You've got a brand new, beautiful office and you're treating it with disrespect. And I didn't talk to the trainees. I didn't talk to the juniors. I talked to the seniors, to the managers. I said, what are we doing? Like, why is the CEO mouthing off in the senior leadership chat about why Bristol's a mess? I'm sure they all thought that. I'm sure in their heads they thought that. But because they're responsible for that. I empower them to look after that office. And look, cups and plates are not a big issue. But
nor are chairs.
Nor are chairs. But it is a big issue when it comes to the little things, the 100 small things that matter. Are what makes up a great culture. It's what makes up a great business. It's what makes a great student experience.
Yes, the other side of this roundabout is Yeovil Hospital. And there used to be a chief exec in there called Paul Mears. So when I was here, we worked together as both chief execs. And he used to have a sign on every ward. And it was a simple sign, and I use it a lot. And it just simply said, the standard you have set is the standard you've just walked past.
The standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
Absolutely.
It's very, very at the core of culture. It really matters. So, John, lots of the themes today have been culture. And actually, it sounds to me like you put TLA at the heart of everything. So, in what place does culture impact TLA? And then what makes great TLA? And does TLA have an input on what makes great culture? Which comes first, the horse or the cart? But I'll let you
I think the culture does lead to, it does. I'm not sure TLA has an impact on culture. TLA has a big impact on impact,
yes,
but I'm not sure it has a big impact on culture. I think the culture of how important staff feel about the quality of what they deliver, that it's a culture that drives that for sure.
Yeah.
So colleges that invest heavily, and it doesn't have to be money, but it's time. So I remember going to a particular college, but I'd gone in to help for 3 months. And this is between when I was going from Swindon to coming here at Yeovil College. And because the principal here wanted 6 months notice, I had 3 months, and I got a phone call to say, can you come and help this for 3 months? And I worked my socks off at that college, driving, teaching and learning, making sure things were okay. And then I put in learning coaches, as we called them then, the process for observations, all that stuff put in. And I remember walking down a corridor and the VP for finance was coming the other way. And his opening line was to me was, how long is this teaching and learning fad going to continue because it's expensive? And one of the things Jim Collins talks about, isn't it, about people being on the right seat or on the wrong bus or on the right. This guy was on the wrong seat and the wrong bus.
Yeah,
he was working in the wrong place. Because and Cornwall have got caught by that, haven't they? They cut the budget on TLA, and TLA clearly wasn't designed to be important. And then that is our core business, which will give you the outcomes of what you are judged by. So, and certainly in the new Ofsted toolkit, that whole rhetoric of how you develop staff, and actually staff taking ownership of their own pedagogical development is certainly huge.
Yeah, but we say learner-led, in which we mean we're going to lead you, but you need to feel like you're leading it.
We
do call it
are.
learning.
I did a session last week, or 3 sessions last week, with a certain college doing teaching and learning. And one of the things I was trying to get across to them is you are the facilitators of learning. You don't have to do it all. I see far too many lessons where a member of staff will walk out exhausted and the students will just wander out, probably not even broken into their short-term memory, completely long way around, where the students need to be crawling out exhausted,
yes,
and the member of staff floats out because actually they've just facilitated the process. But that's just about having the knowledge to be able to do that, and being able the skills and the experience to be able to do that.
And you can teach great TLA, right?
Oh, for sure.
It can be taught. Yeah. We don't need to have innate characteristics. We need some, but broadly we can take someone whose TLA is of a weaker level and we can make that outstanding.
Providing they can communicate.
As long as they can
Providing they can communicate, you can develop a good or better teacher, for sure.
And if a principal CEO called you today and said, John, in 3 headlines, what 3 bits of advice would you give them to rapidly improve TLA within a college? Just headlines. I don't need too much detail.
That is a really, really good question. I think you first of all need a starting point. You need to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yes.
And as a principal or a senior team, you surely need to know, and I'll bring it right down to where your good teachers are and where the teachers are that need support.
Yep.
So 1. 2 then is to making sure that there is adequate support available and the members of staff are able to access that support. And then
willingly.
Pardon?
Willingly.
Well, you've opened up a can of worms again, because for me, when you go in and do an observation and it hasn't gone particularly well, and you know what, that happens all the time. When we used to measure teaching and learning from good or better, grade 2, grade 1s, I'm always amazed when I go into colleges and the SAR or the principal tells me that their teaching and learning is 100% good or better. It's impossible because things happen, things go wrong. The important thing is we build a team of institution of teachers that are reflective. So things, the best practitioners are reflective practitioners. So if things go wrong, they're able to do something about it. So the second one for me would be I was going to give you the 2 examples because you said willingly, which threw me, because it always falls fairly easy if things haven't gone quite well. It's how they receive the feedback. Because if the feedback is, how dare you tell me I'm not teaching very well, or I'm not having the impact I should be. I've been teaching like this for 20 years. It's probably time to retire.
Yep.
But if they say, thank you for the feedback, can I work with you? For me, that's the willing bit. Because if they're not willing, they probably shouldn't be in the organisation. And then the third one for me is about having a very simple way of measuring impact. And then the job's never done. I think you have to accept the fact the job's never done, and that you keep that cycle going, because none of it ever is quick fix. The people learn today differently than they did from 5 years ago, which are different from 10 years ago. I always say that most people can Google in, 5 minutes what takes you 3 weeks to teach and research. So move on, accept that, use it, and work with it. So if for me, outstanding teaching learner or exceptional teaching isn't rocket science, but as long as we've got the processes in place. You said something earlier about processes and culture. Again, another one of my strap lines is I always think that, using the old terminology, going from inadequate to good is systems and processes. Going from good to outstanding or exceptional now is culture.
It's culture, yeah. You can run a good business with good systems, good processes.
You can. I can remember when finally got the call at Swindon for Ofsted, and I got all the staff in the main hall on the Friday because Ofsted would come in on the Monday. And one of the sides I put was, don't hold back. Because I knew that it was interesting then, because Michael Willishaw had come forward and said, no college could be outstanding unless the teaching and learning was outstanding. Now, we'd all agree with that. But up until that point, which was 2013, it'd never been achieved. Because in those days, outstanding was given on results, not on the quality of TLA. And we just used to teach to the test. So it sort of threw an extra challenge in a way, because then we went into this new framework knowing that we had to get a TLA outstanding. And so I didn't want any of the staff, because if most teachers could teach a grade 2 lesson after they've been teaching for a while, almost guarantee it. It might be a bit ploddy, but they just about scrape into that 2 boundary. clearly these grade terminologies are going to change very soon because we've got, they would be an expected standard under the new remit. If they want to go to exceptional or outstanding, you stand the risk of it going the other way because you're taking a risk.
You have to take a risk.
Right. But that's what makes lessons. That's what really changes students' customers' long-term memory because they see exciting things happen. And I didn't want the Swindon staff to play safe. And I just said, look, go and have a go. If it goes wrong, it's my fault. As nominee, it's my fault. Just tell me. And consequently, clearly, it didn't go wrong. It was all right. I
was with the principal the other day, I'm not going to say who, but they had said to me, I'm going to take a hit on my achievement rates to deliver really good teaching learning, to deliver really good outcomes for my students. And he was so sure of that, and I was so excited by it, that I was fueled by his energy. And he was like, my achievement rates are brilliant. They were in the mid-90s, and they are brilliant, and our learners need better outcomes. So therefore, I'm going to have to sacrifice a little bit of what they're getting to pass an exam to mean that they can have more time to capture skills that are better for them, for their outcomes. Not their achievements, but their life outcomes.
And that is because he or she has taken on finally that the curriculum needs to be an ambitious curriculum.
Yes.
And therefore then it is not just about the qualification. It is, and if it's vocational, it's finding out from employers exactly what skills, knowledge and behaviours is needed to be able to them to be successful in the future. And making sure then that they put that in. So a good example would be if you go to some of my colleges, I don't want to point people to colleges, but if you go to some of my colleges, you go to the hairdressing lessons, there are no chairs in the classroom.
It's a workshop.
No, in the classroom. Because you think about it, because you listen to the employers, they do a level 2 at college, they do hairdressing, they go to hairdressing. By 10:30, they're sat in the corner because they're exhausted. Because you never find a hairdresser doing their job on their bottom. So we took the chairs out of the classroom. You would go to my construction departments, and they would do for the first 20 minutes of every practical session. They would do sit-ups, planking, and press-ups to a PB, because otherwise you're going to again do a level 2 or whatever, and they go on site, and then we get employers saying, well, they go home after a day because they're exhausted.
Yeah.
I got a good friend of mine who's heavily into performing arts in a professional level, and he came down and he watched some of the stuff we were doing. He said, John, it's really great. He said, but they never make the industry. They're just not fit enough. So we put Couch to 5K in the first term. I guess what I'll give you 100 of these examples. I guess what I'm saying to you is this is about that ambitious curriculum. It's not being driven just about the qualification. It's saying, do you know what? Your success rates, achievement rate might drop down a bit because we need to do this other stuff.
Yeah, I think that would take away from, but nobody wants an exam factory. Nobody, not even the student doesn't enjoy it, the parents don't enjoy it, the educators don't enjoy it. What you want is to see genuine positive outcomes for the people that are in your charge. So with that in mind, what do you think colleges can learn from other institutions about training, about culture, about anything? Because it sounds to me like you've used industry, brought it into FE.
Over the years, there's lots out there that just by taking the time out and going back into industry. So here, I first put in place back into industry days. So every single member of staff goes back into industry. And that included me. And I want to give you an example of that. If you go to Cornwall College now, right across the group, up 3 days a year, staff will go back into industry. Because at all different levels, there is stuff to learn from industries. And certainly for teachers, it gives them the credibility, it gives them the links and all the rest of it. A good example for here, which helped me brilliantly at Cornwall College, was I chose the police force. So I had the morning initially with the Chief Inspector for Somerset and Avon Police, where I stayed with him for about an hour, 2 hours. Then I worked with some other officers, and then I went on the beat for the afternoon where we did a couple of drug busts and all the rest of it. It was surreal, brilliant. The point I'm trying to make to this one, though, was in the morning, the chief inspector needed to communicate really quickly with his other within the force, within his region, so under his watch. And they just did what I call is a morning meeting. So they had an 8:30 call. He said, John, just sit with me while I do it. And they literally shared the information, what they were doing. So, of course, when I got to Cornwall, one of the things that I had, the question was, well, nobody knows what's going on. So I put in place this morning meeting where no matter what campus you were on or country you were in, because you could have been in Spain or Portugal, 8:30 every morning, only for 5 minutes, we always have that conversation. And it just made sure that everybody was aware of everything that was going on.
Yep.
I saw that in industry. It worked really, really well.
We saw it in the police and it worked well.
And I saw it in the,
And we do something very similar in that the start of every day, the team sets up the day. What's the wins today? What's the losses today? What are the problems that we're not dealing with? What are the problems that we're going to have to deal with? And then at the end of the day, we close out what went well. And they close that day off. Yeah, over time, things get lazy and you do an email day plan and then you do an email closeout and then you get to a point where you're like, right, actually, we have to bring everybody together because it can't lose its personal touch. As a leader, you understand what your people are up to and you could leave them to crack on. But some people really enjoy that extra touch point, that set the day and set it up the right way. So your lived experience sounds epic. You've been through loads of different colleges. You've worked at loads of different places. To me, culture is values. How do you see values showing up across the country? Because in some colleges, I'm sure they're just words on a wall. Where's the kind of best examples of where you can feel those values being used and in effect?
Are we talking in education?
In education.
Okay.
Difficult question.
Yeah, because I wasn't going to use that as an example because I'm always amazed by Timpsons.
Right, okay.
The values of Timpsons.
Tell me about Timpsons.
Well, just you go into Timpsons, where no matter where you go in the country, into Timpsons, that their ownership of the making sure they meet the customer need, the smile that you met, and then you dig below the surface and you realise that I know there's lots of things, idiosyncrasies that they do, but for things like every single member of staff gets their birthday off every year. There's just little stuff in there.
We do that.
Yeah, I know some people do. I mean, I've thought about doing that in colleges. The problem you'll have is
Term time.
if you're driven by the learner experience and you're giving somebody off and they're supposed to be teaching, so therefore you end up with the support staff can have it and teachers can't. So I never quite got into that. Going into an example in colleges, to be perfectly honest, it was quite nice coming back here today. I've not been back here since I left 5.5 years ago. And already the sort of things that the dress codes, the way the reception is, even though it's a builder site, because I'm in a brand new multi-million pound building here, about 60 odd million, I think they haven't done. And I've been handed a mug and it's a logoed mug. Honestly, when I first came, it was chipped mugs. There was no dress codes. You wouldn't have been welcomed. I've been quite impressed today that how it makes you feel. But in terms of anywhere else, there's nothing really that stood out. I think we all, because we're dealing with people, there will always be things that work and things that don't work. And so there's been nowhere I've been that it's just absolutely perfect everywhere. Some great colleges around mine.
I'm not allowed to take a side in this particular war. I will support every college on its journey. But there are some that I walk in and I think, wow. And others that I walk in and I think, there's some work to do here.
Yeah. So, I must shout out for my hometown that Bridgewater and Taunton College, Bridgewater College I still call it, has got it right for many, 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 many years and is probably up there in the top 5. I can't think there's many that could match it, both for their culture and for their resources. But you're
putting some pressure on me to shout out some great examples of fantastic colleges.
Because I'm very southwest, aren't I? So I don't go for... I've done some inspections in London in the last couple of years, but outside of that, I tend not to go further north than Birmingham.
I'm not going to be dragged into where I see fantastic examples of culture and where I don't. What I will say is that the intent behind almost every FE leader that I encounter is to be a fantastic student experience. They just deliver it in slightly different ways. And I think the overwhelming majority that I encounter.
Yeah, and I think I echoed that earlier, that everyone is different. They do it different ways. I'm so pro FE when I think about where we are. I mean, what was the review we had, which was we were the forgotten child and all that stuff. And I guess I've seen it go in cycles so many times. And we just do so much second, third, fourth chances for people that, I've been up to Westminster and spoken to MPs about, you want to invest in schools and you want to do all that stuff and you want to invest in universities and they're getting over £9,000 a student. But next time you want your hair cut, your car fixed, your kids looked after, or you want a plumber, you want an electrician. None of those came from university.
I think the Conservative Party pursued somewhat of a policy of just send them to higher education and forgot FE for a long period. And that's why we're getting these funding gaps. That's why we're less well off than secondary. And yeah, they make token gestures of investment and capital grants, but fundamentally, we have an underfunded further education system that drives the very core of the economy. And I was with Chris Claydon from JTL, very intelligent man. And he basically said any of these infrastructure projects, they require electricians. But you have a not fit for purpose level 3 qualification that doesn't work, that is underfunded. How do you intend to fund and design and build the electrification of the UK? And he was like, do something about electrical installations and you will do something. But all of these big projects are they're anchored in further education skills.
Yeah, they are.
Massively so. So I think you've probably got some pretty strong opinions on this, but what's a value, what's good leadership look like in further education? What's the core of it?
I've got two simplistic statements, which is I think to be a really, really effective, I'm not using any judgment words, really effective leader in FE, you've got to have a really strong moral compass because you're going to have a lot thrown at you where you are going to have to make at times some really difficult decisions. And if you've got a really good moral compass and you communicate well with that, staff will always buy in. They might not like it, but they'll understand the reasons you've made it. And I think the other one is, which is always a bit strange, is I don't think you should have an ego. And I think it makes it difficult to win hearts and minds of the people that are going to decide whether you are successful or not if you've got a strong ego.
That is totally agree in the first part. Second part is such a subjective statement because I think you require a certain amount of ego to exist.
Is it ego or confidence?
He's talking to a salesperson here. So we split that line. And I have gone through parts of my life being ego-driven and making decisions based on ego, making decisions based on what will make me feel really good. And in other places, I've made decisions because I am a confident person who is capable in most scenarios, and I feel like my organisation and myself can handle it. It's the driver behind the decision that denotes whether it's ego-driven, I think. And maybe wanting your name up in lights because that's good for you, not good for your organisation, is where we see ego show its kind of more grubby hand. But screaming about your organisation, getting yourself recognised, getting yourself out there and being that ambassador for your organisation and putting your name up in lights that drives things back to your org, I'm massively behind that. But I imagine that those two things from the outside looking in might look very similar.
Maybe I'm too simplistic. To me, that didn't sound like ego. That sounded like an effective leader. When you stand up, do you say I or do you say we? For me, any accolade that came our way, I would always make sure I'd send the staff to go and get it. I would never go. It doesn't. And I often wonder, what does it take for if you're truly customer focused? Why would your CEO have a separate parking space? And they may not, but they'll tell you here and they'll tell you at Cornwall, I got rid of all that.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm not more important than any customer.
So, John, how do you balance the operational pressures of further education with the need to create vision and inspiration and put the learners at the heart of it? So you've got all these other things going on. You might have to do stakeholder engagement. You might have to speak to the local MP. You might have to deal with the DFE. How do you balance that against just trying to provide a brilliant student experience?
And I think that for those that are going into the principal's role, I remember when I left Swindon as VP and came here as principal, the principal at Yeovil at Swindon said to me as I was leaving, literally as I was leaving the building, he said, "Welcome to the most loneliest job in the world." I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but there is a degree of truth in that, I guess. It is difficult, and I remember coming here when my passion was TLA, and that's all I wanted to do was TLA. the thought of having to go external and be involved in the external world, I wasn't particularly keen on. But it is a necessary part of the role. And of course, once you have the title CEO as well as principal, it's a big part of the role. I think it's important to balance it. I think it's important to make sure you can do it all. And therefore, I'm a great believer in using people at their strengths. So as long as I had the right people in place to be able to do the driving of the culture and the values across the organisation, once I was comfortable with that, I was able then to go and do the external stuff. And that is true for both the Oval and Cornwall, that I was very insular for the first 6 or 8 months. I didn't want to be outside shouting about the college when I didn't get the product right. No. Because it was going to bite me. So you've got to get that right first, and that's, stakeholders in terms of employers, in terms of local schools, because the schools, whether they believe in what you do, they play a big part in whether you get any customers or not. So for me, you have to balance both, but I would, from my point of view, I would make sure that you work with what your strengths are. And for some CEOs, it may be that business acumen, that ability to go out there and sell and promote. Others, it might be more of an internal thing, but you then need somebody strong who's going to do. So it's that balance of a team to make sure. But colleges can't survive on their own. No. They've got to work with stakeholders. And just making that statement, we all do. And everyone, we all do very well in their own remit. That's one of the strengths that FE has. We collaborate really, really well. And also with each other. In many parts of the UK, FE collaborate really, really well. And in the Southwest, it's always been strong.
Champion the Southwest. I'm also Bristol born. Can you give me an example then of a FE exemplar leader, someone that you think stands out as a fantastic ambassador to the sector?
That's still working?
Yeah.
Again, I'm very Southwest centric, aren't I? So, and I'll get shot now because I know everybody, and they said, why didn't you choose me? I have high regard for I have high regard for many, many, many people. I think that John Laramie, when you look at what John Laramie's done, we've always competed, me and John. He'll tell you this, if he was in here, he'd be saying the same. We've always competed. So he was at North Devon, and I think I was at South Devon. He took that to outstanding. I took South Devon. I was part of it. I was part of South Devon, going it to outstanding. And then we moved. He went to Exeter, and then I went to, where did I go next? Swindon. So we sort of did this all the way through. And John just, everything he touches, I'm going to say he turns to gold, but he does really well. But what John does also really well is he works on the national scene and has an influence. I've never done that.
Exeter College's GCAP is a really good example of that.
I just don't want to do that. I'm all about the learn. I'm in a way, I'm the worst CEO because I'm too focused on the customer. That sounds daft, but you see what we're talking about in terms of that bigger piece of work. The person that's taken that external work even further would be Andy Berry at Bridgewater and Taunton College, who just represents FE and HE and FE so well nationally and to a certain extent internationally. But I have so much admiration for what Andy has achieved at Bridgewater and Taunton College. For me, I think those two are extremely exemplary at what they do. And you've got up-and-coming ones. Yep. Julia Gray at City of Bristol. I have a lot of time for Julia. And the first time we met, she came to visit me when I was at Cornwall College. We're just on the same page.
I've loved the transformation of Bristol.
It's working well, and as you know, I'm working with them as well. I'm enjoying it. I'm there tomorrow. So yeah, it's gone really well. And I think I've already said about people in the past, but if you asked me to hold somebody up there really high, as from the past, and it would be Heather Maxwell, because I thought she was an absolutely amazing principal, and I tried to emulate lots of the things that she did.
Brilliant. And you've pretty much named every principal in the Southwest, so I don't think anyone's going to shoot you.
Oh, there is a few. I could tell you some more, but there are a few. And Southwest, big shout for Southwest. Southwest are the highest performing FE area in the UK, so we can't be doing bad, can we?
Somewhat to blame, I think, for you, John. I think lots of impact.
No, I have played my part, but there's some really good people.
Some really good people. So recruitment and retention are massive in the challenges of further education. From a leadership and culture perspective, maybe your perspective, what can colleges do to be better, more attractive employers?
I've done this many times. So I have this simple philosophy, which is because we tend to struggle primarily, and it's mainly because of the colleges I've been in, I guess, with the vocational areas.
Yes.
The areas where the salaries are now not equivalent to what we used to get. They're now 2 or 3 times higher. You're trying to appoint a plumber for 28 grand.
That won't work for the audience.
This is madness. So it's for me, I've always had this philosophy that said people in trade think they cannot be teachers. And I'm going to stop there because I want to go back to one example. So before I started at Cornwall, I went over to Switzerland with Graham Rasey and a couple of other principals, and we did the review for the government on what works over there. And of course, the difference over there is that everybody aspires to be. They want to be a teacher. No matter what career you're in, you're aspired to be a teacher, partly because of salaries. Over here, I think there is a bit about they think they can't. And they can't because, and I get a bit tongue-in-cheek with this, but they can't because they need 2 degrees. Of course, most of our vocational staff will never get above level 3. They might have level 4, but if you're a plumber, electrician, a motor vehicle mechanic, an engineer, chances are they're very highly skilled at what they do, but they've got a level 3. Right? We still bang out job descriptions saying must have a degree. So you're never going to. So straight away you're putting a barrier in before they even start.
Yeah.
The other thing is I think that they all think they've got to have a leather patch on their jacket because they've got to be a teacher. And I'm being facetious.
But a school teacher. That's what they think.
I'm breaking the barriers down. So a good example would be. In fact, it was here. The first time I did it was here. So I got here and construction was off-site and construction was awful. Right, the delivery, the facilities. So I said, look, we'll build something on site, which is just over the back here, make it new, but we've got to step up about 6 gears, right? And this is what I need you to do. And clearly many of them didn't want to do that. So I went on the radio and we created this advert because I thought in my mind, what do tradespeople do when they listen to the radio?
They listen to TalkSport.
So if you can get on the right radio station and you go, calling all tradespeople, whatever it was. In this case, it was calling all construction trades. And then I had a hammer banging and a driller. Would you like to take that first step into teaching and inspire the tradespeople of the future? Come and talk to us. Right. And what we did was then we aligned it with an open evening for students because they wanted to come for a dead campus. We had 110 turn up. Now that sounds great, but the reality is going back to culture and behaviours, I now need 110 to leave here thinking this is the best place ever.
Of course.
So you've got to work hard with 110. Now, in the end, we only recruited 14 of them. 14 was brilliant because that was all we needed. We then put them all in AET at the same time. Mm-hmm. And
a cohort.
The cohort. And as far as I'm aware, because I haven't been back here for a while, they still celebrate that day when they all started with a cake every year because they're still here, I think. But I've taken that model to wherever I've gone, and we've never failed to recruit.
I know,
and that's not going to help you because that
massively. It massively helps us because that's what we do.
Okay.
So one of the first challenges I faced was that sometimes we've got to do mass hiring. We've just completed several big projects for big colleges that have had to hire 14 to 18 people. And what we do is we create open days, we create open evenings, we create enthusiasm behind getting people into teaching. We hosted one at Chelmsford College, we've hosted one at Cheshire College, we've hosted one at Solihull College. If anyone's listening to this, go and try and work with them, please. By all means, if they can find great staff, then I'd like you to work with anyone we work with. But we create an environment and an event that gets the best of FE out. I did it. I started them at Wigan and Lee. When I first started Dovetail, Wigan and Lee were a great ambassador. They got the head of teaching and learning out. They got the head of catering out. They fed them. Yeah. They talked to them. The only thing we didn't do was show them students. So they showed them the workshops. We created an experience lacking the key ingredient. I think that's maybe something that I've taken from this is that we can involve the students in that fantastic outcome. But John, that's absolutely what works. If we get people to love the sector, the outcome will be.
Once they realise they can, you then obviously have to have the conversation around salary, but that's what you then have to deal with. I mean, at my last place, we had to pay an awful lot of money for agricultural engineers to
Still do now.
It's just the nature of it.
Impossible. So what's one piece of advice then, John, that you would give to a leader that wants to take that top spot, that lonely chief exec principal's role?
Yeah, it doesn't sell it very well, does it? Welcome to the most loneliest job in the world.
I know exactly what they mean, and you know what they mean.
Yeah, I do, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. But the reality is, what a job. to be able to see you change so many lives. There was there's two things to hang on to. There's two the main dates in my diary that I used to look forward to every year. One was the FE Awards, and the other one was the HE graduations in Truro Cathedral. Just both of them. And the one just after the pandemic where we had to do 3 lots, we had to do them in groups of 200s, that because we'd gone through the pandemic, and I guess for many of them, they didn't know whether they were ever going to see this moment. The emotion was incredible. And I think to be part of that you've had an impact on somebody's life, as we do in FE, to think that I always think a privilege of it. You think how many professional footballers, how hard it would be to be a professional footballer. It's almost impossible. But you think about it, there's probably, I don't know, in the Premier League earning huge money, there's probably 300, something like that, maybe 400. There's under 200 principals and CEOs. So to get that opportunity, if you get the opportunity, take it and take it with both hands, because I've had an amazing career. I've loved every minute of it. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change any of it. I just thought it was a great career. Yeah.
John, thank you very much for a very insightful and enjoyable experience. Your passion for TLA is clear. Your passion for people, your passion for change, and your passion for FE have certainly impressed me, and I look forward to seeing whatever it is you do over the next few years. But thank you so much for coming on.
I really, really enjoyed it.
Perfect.
Yeah.